I'm going to start very simple. I'm going to start with the 3 blessings today. I actually have a topic and that. But let's start with, does anybody know what the 3 blessings are? I'm going to be a little bit different, more interactive, you know. I'm not just going to talk from up here, but go ahead, Malik. What?
Be fruitful, multiply, take dominion.
Okay, be fruitful, multiply, take dominion. But let me ask you all, and anybody can answer this, and it's just a straight question and an honest question. Does anybody really know in 2 sentences or less what it means to be fruitful from the original idea, and how do you accomplish that? Anybody? Well, what does maturity mean in 2 sentences or less? I mean, we always talk about it on our lectures and our sermons and that, but has anybody ever told you where anybody from 90 years old to a 4-year-old can understand what it means to be fruitful? Go ahead, Malik.
Become one in mind and body with God.
Become one in mind and body with God. Okay, that's the correct answer, but does a 4-year-old know what that really means?
Well, he's not fruitful.
You know, you say it to a young child and they're going to go, okay, those are big words, but what do I do now? Maybe even to a 40-year-old, you might say that and they're going to go, what do I do next? So it's not a wrong answer.
Obey your parents.
Obey your parents. But that only gets you so far.
Yeah.
How well does it work in your family? It only goes so far, right? There's got to be more to it. The point that I'm trying to make is that there's been much revelation, much sacrifice in that to bring the truth to mankind. And that, but really, even though we understand and we know, like when Malik said, become one with God's heart and mind and body, we know that's true, but we don't know how to make it a reality for ourselves. And that's really what I want to touch on the 3 blessings. So we'll start with the first one, and after that, and do something a little bit different today. After I talk about the first blessing, normally the younger children or whatever go and have their deal. If you want to go and down and talk about what you heard or whatever, go right ahead, or you can stay here and listen to me yak some more. But the first blessing, I'd like to start with some things that Father said. He said a lot, obviously. And that I need to get my arm shortener on, and that. But let's see, in my notes here, start page 24, God's existence. Let's see, oh yeah, here it is. This goes back to 1969. Father was speaking in Tokyo, Japan. Centering upon God, there is the heart of parents looking to... Centering upon God, there is the heart of parents looking down to the children, the heart of children looking up to their parents, and the reciprocal heart of husband and wife, who are confident to initiate these 3 points of heart. So, Father's talking about the relationships of heart inside of a family. Okay? And then the second one I want to go to, page 37. This is from a speech in Seoul, Korea. And actually his very beginning words and opening statements to the speech in 1970 in Seoul is, "What is the ultimate purpose of God's providence?" It is the completion, which means complete perfection. No one seeks incompleteness in anything. And this is the thing, is when we say be fruitful, we say those things, we know that it's true, or we feel that, but we don't know how to complete it. We don't know how to do it. And we have this sense inside of ourselves, there's more that I need to do or understand. And recently it came to me, really, what does it mean to be these three blessings? What does it mean to be fruitful? Well, in reality, to put it very simply, it means that you're able to love your brothers and sisters as God loves them. And this came to me through a very interesting route. You know, if you're a parent and you have children, eventually they come to an age where they, you know, marriage and that. But I came to the realization, how would I know whether my children are ready to be married or have a family or be husband or wife to someone else? As a parent, that's just an obvious question, isn't it? Well, it came to me, what is it? Well, when my children can love their brother and sister as I love the brother and sister, my children. Let me take an example. Chilene, Urbik, Chime, that's my family. When Chilene can love Urbik the same way his mother and father love him and God loves him, then she's fulfilled the first blessing. She has inherited the heart of the parent or of God in her relationship with her brothers and sisters. It's actually not so complicated. You know, I realized, gee, all this theology and all these thousands of years, it's actually a very natural thing. You know, what's perfection of a child in a family? Any of you that are parents, you ever have a time when your children are like cat and dog and not getting along?
Yeah.
Okay. How does that feel? How does that feel in your heart? Is that the kingdom of heaven? Okay. But when your children, even though they have different minds, different personalities, different opinions, when you can harmonize with them, and your children harmonize and they work together, centered on the parent's desire and heart, what does that feel like? Isn't that the kingdom of heaven in your home?
So?
Okay. So, really, what is the first blessing? And I realized, and here I am in my 50s and I didn't understand this. Father did by reading his words. I go in there, there's many things. But it's very simply what Jesus was telling us. You know, Jesus' two great commandments for those of us that remember them. Love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and all thy mind. And the second is like unto it. Love one another and do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Basically, Jesus was telling us right there what the standard of being fruitful was. Actually, it wasn't even just Jesus. Even in the Old Testament, the whole foundation for Judaism comes on the foundation of who? Who was called Israel? Anybody know? Jacob. But Jacob was called Israel, the victor, after what event?
The wrestling with the angel.
No. Well, yeah, wrestling after the angel. But then he did what after wrestling with the angel?
Esau.
Yes, he united with his brother, with Esau. And if you read it in the Bible, when he sees Esau and they've reconciled and they've harmonized, Jacob says an amazing thing to Esau, and it's not a political ploy. He says, when I see your face, talking about when he looks at his brother, when I see your face, It's as if I see the face of God. You know, in other words, even Jacob, where did he find God? Where did he unite with God's heart? In his relationship with his brother. So the first blessing, the blessing of being fruitful, yes, it's important we pray. It's important that we have our vertical connection and understand God's thinking and ideal. You need to unite with your parents. But to make it substantial and real, to bring it into substance, it's only fulfilled in our relationship with our brothers and sisters. And where does this start? And this happens very naturally in a family. Any of you that have been parents, when your children are not harmonious, what are the parents like? You know, the hair starts standing out. This is like, come on, let's get things worked out here, you know. It's like that, you know. It's a very natural, normal process. The problem is the fall destroyed all that. Okay? That's the first blessing. I'm going to go into the second and third next. But if it's up, I want to hear from the younger children. That if you want to go and talk about the first one, go ahead, or you can stay here and listen to me. It's up to you. Looks like you want to stay and listen. Okay. Okay, what's the second one, anybody? I'm not the smart one here. Everybody knows. Multiply. Basically that means Adam and Eve, or husband and wife, becoming a husband or a wife. You know, once I understood about the first blessing, I started thinking about what does husband and wife mean in the context of a family. And I just reflected back on my experience. It's very obvious when we're growing up. When you're a child, I remember one of my very earliest memories. It's kind of a silly story, or a simple story, but I was only about 2-3 years old. It's almost the very first memory I ever have. Suddenly I remember I'm in pain, severe pain, on one of my fingers on this hand. I don't remember which finger. But I consciously remember there were these little Tonka toys, construction toys, like equipment used to dig in the dirt, and I was playing with one. And my brother was there, but somehow we had like this little digger backhoe toy, and I'd stuck my finger in where the arm is to dig, and my brother was pushing on it, and obviously my finger was stuck in there. Okay? So almost my earliest memory is of sudden pain. I pull it out, and there's blood, and I hurt. All I knew is suddenly there's this house, this door, I'm screaming and wailing, and I run into the house, and there's a bunch of people, bigger than me, you know. And I'm like, it hurts. And I want the world to know, so I'm screaming and crying. And all these people look at me and I'm like, and just intuitively I knew none of them were the one I wanted. But suddenly this one person comes out, that's the one I want. I go there. Guess who it was? Your mother? Yep, it was my mother. And then I remember later in the day, she took it, she kissed it, she washed it, she put a Band-Aid on it. It still hurt, but I felt better. I really did feel better because Mommy came. Okay? So the first thing I realized is there's this special person called a mother. But then the other thing is, later that day, we went and we got in a car. And then this other guy came in, and I knew this was someone I knew, and it was my family. He's important. Guess who that was?
Your father?
My dad. He gets in and he drives. And I remember in the back seat, and my legs were so short that my feet, didn't even go off the edge of the seat, all the legs completely on the seat. Just sitting back there. But Mom and Dad are up front, I'm happy. As long as I had mommy and daddy, I was happy. But from the very earliest age, it was very clear. There's two types of basic people. Men and women. I don't know why colleges and universities have to have these studies. There's a difference between a lady's brain and a man's brain and this. A little 2-year-old that needs his finger fixed knows that there's a difference between mommy and daddy. I wanted mommy to fix my finger. I want daddy to teach me how to go out and conquer the world. But we're so confused and lost because of the fall. But the other thing is I realized as I was going and that, especially after I met Father and everything, and before the blessing, came to the point where I realized there's a part of God I can't understand by myself. I'm a man. Just, that's the way I was born, that's the way I was made. But God is not a single gender. He's both masculine and feminine, in perfect unity and harmony. There was a whole part of God that I can't experience or understand directly. And that. So really, what is my relationship with God is limited if I don't have my spouse. It's really that simple. And that's the thing, is, okay, you grow up, you learn how to love your brothers and sisters, either as a brother or a sister, from God's viewpoint. But do you really truly know God's complete heart and essence yet? No, you know part of it. There's part that's missing. And the thing is you sense that and you feel unbalanced. This is why in the world, men and women, even though we've got many problems and we haven't worked it out, we go out and we seek out the opposite. Why do you think Match.com is so successful? Is it because they invented this dynamic of men and women wanting to get together? You know? No. Okay? But there's a lot of confusion, but I'm not here to talk about the problems or the confusion, but the ideal. The ideal is after we've become fruitful, after we know how to love as brother and sister, then God says, okay, now it's time, I want to show you another aspect of my heart. I want you to unite with your opposite as one. Father says something really, he says it many times, but I read it lately, I can't find it right now. But he talks about when a man and woman come together in love, they should see and experience God's heart and see God's face. That's how intense and how special it's supposed to be. Okay? And that's it. That's the foundation. And let me ask the husbands this. I'll start with the husbands since we kind of are a bit dense on this. How many of you completely understand your wife's thinking all the time, 100% of the time? Anybody? No. Okay, let me throw the question to the ladies here. You ladies, do your husbands just kind of never get the message, never kind of get what you want them to hear or understand sometimes?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
You see, we are
That's where
united.
Yes.
So also you can exercise patience.
Right. The thing
Very
is,
much.
is we are
Go ahead,
different.
Mary.
I'm not bringing this up to cause
That's my girl.
conflict or that, but men and women are different in certain aspects, physically, emotionally, spiritually. So what harmonizes them? Is it understanding? No. What brings us and holds us together, or should, is God's heart of love and that. You know, do you think God's masculine nature understands 100% God's feminine nature? I don't think so, because even according, you go get the DP book and read about it, it says there's a little bit of this masculine or feminine nature in the masculine deal and this, but they revolve around each other in a dynamic cycle. Okay? You know, I remember my parents, when I went to mom and dad and told them the story about what happened at school or that, the way my mother reacted and the way my dad reacted were completely different. And what they understood and that, and I got to the point, and sometimes I'm like, okay, who do I tell this to first? You know, because they weren't always reacting the same to the same thing. There's a difference.
You know about that question you asked a minute ago?
Yeah, quickly.
I think that the processing power of the male brain can understand the female brain.
Okay, all right.
Wait.
Short.
Yes, short. But I don't think the female brain likes to be captured, because I think the female brain really enjoys variety and possibility. So I think the female brain resists being captured by things like understanding.
Definitely.
Anyway, wait, I don't want to go there. But this is what I'm saying. These are for our weekend marriage deals. We need to get started again, okay?
Okay.
All right? But the point that I'm making is what binds and holds the masculine and feminine together. It's not logic. It's God's heart and love that holds a couple together, or should.
Amen.
That's the point.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why it's important. Okay? All right. Now, let's move on to the third blessing. Anybody know what the third blessing is? Just put it out there.
Dominion.
Take dominion over creation. It's the last one. And I was thinking about this. When I was a young child and that, I just knew if I was hungry, I went to mommy and daddy. If I was cold, I went to mommy and daddy. If I went, everything was like that. And even from God's original viewpoint, if mankind had stayed in the garden, God had everything. It was such a nice place, they didn't even need to wear clothes. It was that comfortable. I don't need to worry about all this. No fashions, just hang out, Unfortunately, maybe, but, so if Adam and Eve had been blessed and started a family in the garden, they wouldn't really have needed anything necessarily, but they would have had something. But what happens in a marriage and that? What comes as a result or a consequence of a marriage? One of the things of the second blessing, something that is incredible, is through that unity of the second blessing, you become a co-creator with God. You actually create life with God's blessing and God's heart. Talk about the miracles of miracles. Okay? Any parent that has children, especially you mothers, it's a miracle. There's no words that can express that. But then as parents, as your children, as soon as you have children, what happens? Oh, I remember Kyoko when Urbik was born. He's got 10 fingers, 5 on each hand, each one. I counted the fingers. Look, they're all there. They're there. You check everything out, you know. But then you start thinking about their future. You know, God created the Garden of Eden as parents. Oh, we need a house. We need this. We need all these things for our children. This is where I realized about the third blessing. You know, people think it's just dominating creation. Dominating creation isn't the point. It's the heart that we interact with creation with. What heart should we interact when we deal with creation and all of creation? Not just the physical. You know, there's a spiritual creation as well, and how we tend and care for that as well. But how should we interact with all of creation? As parents, with the heart for our children, because the purpose of creation, from God's point of view, is so that he could raise his children and fulfill his ideal of love. Therefore, though the only people truly qualified to have dominion over creation are ideal parents, because they have the heart to balance how many trees do we cut down to build a house. We need this. You would never destroy, you would never pollute an environment your children live in.
Bam.
You would never create something that would cause harm, pain, or suffering to your children. And this is why it's the last of the 3 blessings. Is because up to that point, we're in the process of inheriting and growing God's heart and becoming parents like God himself is, and that, you know. But what does this all center on? It all centers on the family, the lineage. This is why throughout history, even if you go outside of religion, psychologists and all this, people that come from strong, healthy families tend to do better than those that don't. Or at least they have less difficulties and struggles. They tend to relate with people better. There's no magic to it in a sense, because that's God's plan. Father says something very interesting, you know, about what's that. But think about it. What's our society and culture like nowadays? Does it value the family? Does it put the family at the front? And that really not. Look even at our school system. They make the parents want to serve the school system. Look at how hostile our society and culture is to parents that want to educate their children in their family at home. You're looked at as being strange. From God's point of view, what's the most important education of all? Is it how many titles and PhD we can get? Let me ask you something. Over here's East Stroudsburg University. Do you think in any of those classrooms they're really teaching you how to be God's son or daughter? I'm not saying what they're teaching is false, but what's it centered on? Is it centered on God's ideal? Is it centered on God's family? If we really want a healthy world and we want a world of peace, until there's peace at home, there'll never be peace in the world. If you can't love your brother and sister, how arrogant is it of you to think that you can go out and solve problems between nations? I don't care how much money you have. I don't care how good a speaker you are. If you can't express God's heart and God's love to your brother or sister, how are you ever going to resolve the pain in their heart that is motivating them and driving them to do bad things? Okay, that's the 3 blessings. I'll just quickly shift into it. Father says very clearly, Satan is the enemy of God's love. I think that's a pretty good definition. But I look at Father's life. You know, Father went to North Korea. Who did he embrace?
Esau.
The leader of
Yeah,
Kim Il-sung.
Kim Il-sung. Yeah, they're both in spirit world now. But the thing is, they were laughing and talking and about, honey, you know, Kim Il-sung actually tried to have people kill and assassinate Father in his lifetime. Okay? There's an American president, actually the one that Father says the most significant from God's point of view is Abraham Lincoln. But Abraham Lincoln said something very interesting about his enemies. And this was when it was clear the Civil War was going to end. And they were discussing fighting, physical fighting and that. But the thing came up about enemies, and there are enemies, they fought against us. And he made the comment, he says, if I make my enemy my friend, have I not defeated and destroyed my enemy? Think about this in the context of brothers and sisters. Not just our family, our extended family. All of us. We are of the lineage of true parents now. We are brothers and sisters by flesh and blood. That's a hard concept to get my mind around sometimes. Much less my mind, how about my heart? How many, I'm sure, I know I have, that I've felt my brother and sister sometimes are my enemy. I feel like they're out there trying to destroy me, or I feel I want to destroy them or get my pound of flesh. Okay? But how do we defeat our enemy? Is it with guns? Is it with that? Is it with those things? Ultimately, no. The way you defeat your enemy is when they realize that you love them. And this is what Father says. They surrender in love. And they are no longer your enemy. This is what Jacob did with Esau. Esau had 400 armed guys waiting for his brother to show up after 21 years. Love exists in the realm of the heart, as Father says. The heart is eternal. It doesn't know time. I still remember, like I say, my first memory. I still remember my brother was the one squeezing that lever on that toy that pinched my finger, that made it bleed and made it hurt. I've overcome that with him long ago. But at the time, I was not happy about that. I still remember that in my heart, as clear as if it happened just a moment ago. I'm sure any of you can think, you remember with your own siblings or your own parents where you felt pain in the heart. It's there. It's in there, and you don't let go of it. Look at a child. When a child feels something, a baby, when they first are born, if they don't feel comfortable, what is it? Their heart doesn't feel good? They want the world to know, okay? They're 100%. But what do you think a lot of the root of the conflicts are? Why do you think Cain killed Abel? Because he couldn't feel love in his heart, or actually he felt the rejection of love in his heart from Abel's arrogance. You know, if you read the Bible, it's really clear. Cain actually prayed to God. God actually spoke to Cain. Cain wasn't out there saying, I want to be Satan's child. He made an offering. God said, go make an offering. You think Cain wasn't serious and put it there? Why do you think he was so angry when his offering was rejected? Because it hurt his heart. And then here along comes Abel. Oh, Cain, oh, gee, well, God like mine, I don't know what's wrong with you. There must be something wrong with you.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think his heart felt? And in the moment, he rose up and he slew his brother. But my point being is people say, oh, I want to work on all these world problems. I want to do all this. Yet I can't go up to my brother right here and say, even though we've had difficulties, even though we've struggled with each other, we're going to overcome it with God's heart and God's love. How? You know, how can we do that? Also, as husband and wife, what's most important in the relationship? Understanding each other or loving each other? What comes first?
Love.
Right. I had a Jewish friend, a brother, dear brother, told me the story of his grandfather when he was like 13, 14 years old. His parents, I don't know the whole background, but they got divorced. Anybody who's like that, broken family. But he actually went and spent a lot of time with his grandparents. But when he was an older teenager or whatever, he got out and he asked his grandfather, he says, Grandfather, I don't understand girls or women, you know. And his grandfather says, He says, you know, even you and Grandma, but you and Grandma seem to get along pretty good. How, you know? And he says, I understand. And he goes, really, Grandpa? You understand, Grandma? He says, no, that's not what I meant. I understand what you're saying. He goes, what? And he said, Grandfather says, I don't completely understand, Grandma. He says, but you've been married, you get along. Well, yes, but here's the thing. I've learned you love them first, and then maybe you will understand them. The important thing is to love one another. Is to make room, you know. And it comes on the foundation first as brothers and sisters, husband and wife, and then also understanding God's heart as a parent to our children. The last thing I want to leave you with is the order of love. The world is upside down because of this. But what's the natural order of love? Our first relationship and most central relationship of love should be with God. Because I'll tell you, in a family with my brothers and sisters, if it wasn't for my parents and if it wasn't for God, I wouldn't want to love them. You know, that's just a frank statement. It's like when my heart rebels because somebody hurt me or did something to something I love or my family, my reaction is not to embrace them or love them. But because of my vertical relationship with God or my parents, then I say, okay, I need a bigger understanding or connection. So our first and most fundamental relationship of love is to be with God. And based on that, we learn to love our brothers and sisters. And then, using that relationship, the second most essential one is the relationship with our spouse. The love with our spouse. Because then we can begin to understand the completeness of God, not just the masculine or the feminine. Okay? And then we can be co-creators. Okay? And through that, children are created and a family is created and God's ideal is created. So, ask the question, who do you love more, God or your spouse? The answer should be from God's, from the ideal viewpoint, should be very clear and simple. It should always be God. Okay? The question between husband and wife, or that in a family, to the children to mommy and daddy. Mommy and daddy, who do you love more, the children or mommy and daddy? It should always be your spouse more than the children. And then the children. And the reason is very clear. It's because without the relationship with God, I wouldn't have my spouse. Without my relationship of love with God, I would not be able to love my spouse. That's why it's first. Not because the spouse is less, but because if I don't love God and love God's heart and seek after God in all things, how can I love my spouse? Because this is God's daughter or God's son. And as parents, if I don't love God's gift to me, God's eternal gift to me, the other part of God's heart that I need, I would never be in a position to create children. That's why it comes before the love of children. Not because children are less, but simply that's the natural order. And because of that, we create and we love our children. And then what's the relationship to creation? It's after children. The same thing. It's really not that complicated. But look at the world. If you were to go and just ask people and parents, do you love your children or spouse more? Many times you'll hear the answer, my children, more than I love my spouse. You talk to people that are married. Many times you ask them, do you love your spouse more than you love God? Well, I'll go to church on Sunday, but it's my spouse that's more important to me. And that, why is this? It's because what did Satan steal in the garden? It affected everything. He stole love. And it's completely upside down. And this is what Father was working and talking about his whole life.
I have one.
Yeah.
I remember just popped out my mind a long, long time ago. Father talked about when you are in an ocean, in an emergency, and you have a spouse and child. You have only one choice to stand. Spouse. Forget about children, just spouse.
Right,
Then I got so shocked.
right. But and that's the way it is. And I'm saying this in a very, everything I've talked about is you know, we can get up and we have people do lectures, we've got divine principle books, we read these things and we say, oh, we're so smart. But can we explain this to our children, to our 4-year-old? Can we do this? I'll be honest. It's been more than 30 years, but Satan doesn't want us to know these basic, simple truths. You know, in the world, people, oh, look how we talk to each other. Oh, I'm important because I'm a PhD, DHC, CHD, this, all this, all that. You know, the only title, the only things that I really, when I'm standing before God and true parents, I want to be able to say, Father, I'm your child. And I want to hear Father say, just like God said to Jesus, this is my beloved Son in whom I'm well pleased. Or this is my daughter in whom I'm well pleased. Take the PhD and go somewhere with it. Okay? Go ahead, Ann.
I wouldn't, discard the education because, for example, I'm seeing doctors and so forth. It's a service also they can do the without the education they wouldn't. So I wouldn't.
I think I may have overstated it. I didn't mean there.
What a doctor can do, I can do, they go through years of training and education, but that's a service. It's also part of serving the health of others. That's an example of the doctor. So is I don't know much about lawyers, but I think the profession, people who have a profession, they actually serve the community, the fellow human being. And they work very hard at it. So I think God, why wouldn't God acknowledge and receive that?
Well, he would. This is what I'm saying. I may have overstated. I was emphasizing a point here. But listen, there's nothing wrong with education. I mean, in my own background, I don't talk about it much, but there's not a lot of people in the world that have been down and run a nuclear reactor. Okay? I can talk subatomic physics with almost the best of them. Okay? If you'd see my children in my bookshelf at home, it's all technical books, most of it. Yes, Chilene,
Half of them are mine.
Yeah, half of them are hers, but my point is, I'm not against education and understanding things. What I'm saying is in the order, the priority. Most of education that we have in the world today deals with what? The dominion aspect of blessing. Okay? But just like I talked about, what's the proper order of love? We need the love for creation. We need education to understand these things. We need these things to serve one another. But the thing is, I'm just, in a broad stroke, I'm saying, look at how our culture and society is. We value people more because of their titles of education.
The materialistic things.
Then we value the level of heart that we have for one another. And that's what I'm saying, is just like I said, the relationship, the love of God first, the love of spouse second, the love of children third, and the love of creation fourth. That's the proper order. And that's why I meant to say, when I stand before God and true parents, the most valuable title is, you are my child in whom I'm well pleased. In other words, I can love my brothers and sisters, I can love my spouse, I can do all these things. We should all pursue education, we should all pursue excellence, because it gives us the ability to do things. Look at what Jacob, when he came to Esau, he didn't come empty-handed. He came with everything.
He came with a smart gift.
He came with but he came with his heart most of all. But behind it all is the heart. Go ahead.
It's also kind of similar in Jesus' time. The scribes and Pharisees, they were so brilliant and the most learned people in Israel, but they couldn't accept Jesus as the Son of God and belittled him because he wasn't educated and wasn't formally educated. And
Exactly.
had the titles that they had.
Exactly. But, and what makes it very clear, one of the times when Jesus was wroth and he chastised the scribes and Pharisees, he said very clearly, "You uncircumcised of heart, you are nothing but a brood of vipers, and your will is to do your Father's will." Uncircumcised of heart. You know, in Jewish tradition, circumcision is the separation from Satan's world into God's lineage. That's what it represents. So he's saying, even though you've never separated from Satan's heart when you're uncircumcised in heart. Those are Jesus' own words. Anyway, I'm getting off on a tangent. That's all I wanted to do for today. Everything else. But anyway.